Hello, this is Greg Ayotte. I'm the Director of Consumer Services with the Brain Injury Association of America, and I'm here today with two more members of the Brain Injury Association Survivor Advisory Council. We have Paul and Kelly joining us today. Thank you guys both for coming on. We're talking again about advocacy. Our Brain Injury Awareness Day is coming up in March in DC. And I know we've got lots of questions about it, folks trying to figure out what it is, how to participate, what they can do to help. So I thought it would be helpful to have folks who have been there and have done advocacy in the past to come and just talk a little bit about kind of their experiences and maybe answer some questions that folks might have. So we will start with Kelly. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you got involved with advocacy?
Thanks, Greg, and thanks for having us. I got started over 22 years ago, and I think I equate advocacy with education. And when we got introduced to the brain injury arena, didn't know a whole lot about brain injury, and I learned very quickly that a lot of other people didn't know a lot about brain injury. So I kind of used education and advocacy kind of hand in hand. In my mind, they were parallel. That if I could educate people about what brain injury was and does and is, then I could also advocate at the same time. And I had the beauty of meeting someone early on who I consider a mentor because she was a spitfire in teaching that education and advocacy. And so I kind of followed what she did and followed the steps. And every time I go out and talk about it, it is, teaching what happens with a brain injury, how the person and the families are affected, not just that day and that moment, but forever, because their lives have forever changed. Not necessarily for the worse or the better, but their lives are forever changed and they can never go back.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's been a theme among folks who have talked about kind of their journey into advocacy is it consistently starts with just kind of sharing your story,
Right.
right? Helping to educate others, kind of increase that awareness and understanding. Um, Paul, can you share a little bit about your kind of initial experiences and journey into advocacy?
Sure. Thanks for having me, by the way. This is a great venue to get the word out. And as Kelly already said, it is about education because I was treated and released the same day with post-concussive syndrome. And I thought later on, after I finished reeling about how incredibly lost I was, I realized that I wasn't the only person that was lost. I wasn't the only person saying, I don't know why you do that. I don't know why this happens. We don't know. And I kept saying, somebody does know. And I started in 2008 and went to Brain Injury Awareness Day. And I remember staying I told myself I was going to stay for 15 minutes. I was exhausted. I had made it from Arlington, Virginia. So it was a metro ride to get there. And I thought, okay, I made it. I'm going to shake somebody's hand and I'm going to take a nap and then I'm going to go home and try this again next year. But from the get-go, uneducated folks were around me going, we don't know why you do that. We don't know what that's about. And like I said a minute ago, somebody has to. But once we get together as a group and start discussing it amongst ourselves, then we get a fruition to say, oh, this is something. This is something we need to back. We need to show up for this. I've stood next to a man that was incensed. It was at a conference, and his wife is standing right next to him with two poles, ski poles, to hold herself up. And he's yelling in my face, I want my wife back. And I'm like, she's standing right next to you. But what he was saying was, I want my wife to be the person that she was before my brain injury. And I thought,
Mhm.
can you do that? This was in 2008. Now I know that's a very slim possibility. Won't ever say no, won't ever say yes, but it taught me a lot about me, first of all. And secondly, It was about helping the next person, whatever that meant. And boy, was that a learning curve in and of itself. But showing up to Brain Injury Awareness Day was a big boost for me to realize that there's other people that have this. You're not alone with this. Sort something out, get something going, and see what works.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, again, it's that learning how to kind of tell your story, share your story, hearing it from others. Um, because one of the questions we often get is, yeah, kind of what's the point? Like, why are we doing this? Um, and I think it's hard to help folks envision one, not only just like what the day is like and what it's like, but just the process itself, where it's not like the movie or the storybook where you go in and you
Right.
tell your story and they say, aha, we get it. And they're gonna, they're your champion. Like it's not that. My old boss used to tell me, it's like, it's like chopping down a tree, man. Each bit, sometimes a little good chop, sometimes not as good a chop. Sometimes you miss. He goes, but you keep at it, and it's that slow kind of progression. I felt like that was an apt kind of analogy where the process of education and increasing awareness and understanding is multiple conversation process,
Yeah.
as well as hearing the importance of hearing multiple stories, right? So if it's just you sharing your story with somebody, that's helpful. But if you have a legislator or a staff person hearing 10 stories and all a little different, but that helps to kind of paint a little better picture.
But if I might jump in, there is a common thread amongst us, which is we all don't know everything.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to inject that part is having that voice out there that says, "Hey, we need more help with this thing called brain injury." That'd be ideal. And
Yeah.
Capitol Hill is the place today to go get that done.
So one of the things too I wanted to have an opportunity to talk with you both about was just so folks who may be considering coming, maybe some tips, strategies, things to be mindful of before coming. And this time we'll start with Kelly. We'll start with Kelly.
Okay, so there are a few things I've learned over the years, and I've made many mistakes. One is to wear comfortable shoes.
Yeah.
I made that
Mm,
mistake a couple years in a row where I paid the price later. So make sure you have comfortable shoes, even if you have to have another pair of shoes in a bag with you and switch out if you don't feel that it looks appropriate. But really, no one's really looking at your feet, so don't worry about that. Um, Definitely have a water bottle. Some of the buildings you can enter with a filled water bottle, some you cannot. So bring an empty one just in case. So you have that.
mhm,
Nutrition, make sure you can eat. There's cafeterias that are available, but you can also bring something into some of the buildings because you have to take care of yourself. Because if you can't make it through the day, you can't share your story. So, and you don't have to meet with every single person. You don't have to do everything. Figure, like Paul said, he went for 10, 15 minutes, shook a hand, and then took a nap. Okay, that's fine, but that's a success. He got there. He was able to do that. So every time you can go and you can just do a little bit, maybe sometimes you can add on a little bit more, and sometimes you have to dial it back just depending on where you are that particular day and time. As we all know, brain injury can crop up at any point and take us by surprise, unfortunately. And have a plan for your day, how it's going to go, where you're going to meet people, and give yourself extra time.
mhm.
Those are my top.
One
I'm
of
sure
the
Paul
other
has some.
tips I had heard someone else mention that I don't think I would have thought to say it, but I do it. Is that not only do you map out what building you're going to go to, but map out where in the building you're going. That those buildings are large and you might have offices in different parts of it. And so knowing where the office number is, how to get there before you ever walk in the building can be very helpful. Because it can be a little, I don't know if it's intimidating or disoriented. I mean, it's a new space, new building, new everything. So the fewer things you have to really stress on and worry about and have planned before, the better. I don't know, Paul, if you had any other tips, strategies
Of
that you've
course.
used.
Of course I do. And one thing that I remember going into this early was I was too gung ho. I was too, I'm going to go in there and
Yeah,
change everything. And
yeah.
that's not how this works. Brain develops slowly. You don't learn to talk until you're two. So 2 years into it, you're finally talking. Maybe 3 years, you're finally walking. Think about it along those terms. And slow and steady wins a race. Kelly gave some excellent tips. The only other one I can think of is have a notebook with you to write
Mm,
down the person's name, who they're with, and it really has to be something that you have to focus on and what you talked about in a full sentence, not just playing cards. You want to spell out what they said before you move on to the next person, because this venue that we have today is crammed full of people, as you can imagine, because the brain is so diverse and all over the place. Have something that you can write down in a notebook that says even their description so you can remember what they look like. Break everything down into small pieces. Also, give yourself grace, give yourself time. You might get overwhelmed because one of these buildings, I think it's the Hart building, goes underground at one point.
hmm
We may
hmm
not be used to that. And now we have to go underground. Nobody said anything about that. It's just kind of, it's an adventure. It truly is. And water, I mean, the brain is mostly water anyway, so you're just filling it back up again. But the processing of that day uh, really has sharpened my mind because I'm paying attention to it. I'm paying attention because I'm in it for not only me but for the next person. So and plus the person that you're talking to 9 times out of 10 have never heard the term brain injury. They don't know what that means. So go in knowing that you're literally educating from ground zero, from the get go.
That's good. Yes. So I'll add a couple other things that I know from talking to other folks as well. Um, the importance of practicing telling your story. It's that balance of, I always told folks, you've got a minute to 2 minutes to tell your story, which in some ways feels like a long time, but it's a short time, where you want enough information and detail to make it a compelling story, something that has some some meat to it, but not so much where the eyes start to glaze over. It's too much info. That is not easy to do off the cuff. So I would encourage folks, if they're meeting and want to share their story, should just seriously think about. I didn't know folks who had gone in with like highlights of, they had their bullet points. Here are the 5 things I want to make sure I mention in my story. Other folks have had a script. Other folks have just practiced it. But however what works for you is to ensure that you have a mindset of having an idea of what you want to share when you're kind of sharing your story. I don't know if
Yeah,
you
I
want to
remember.
comment on that.
I remember the first 2 times I wanted to tell my entire
Yeah,
story,
yeah,
and I was like, "Oh, that was a big mistake," because I walked out of there not being able to get to my bullet points,
yep.
or maybe
It's very
glancing
easy.
at them at the very end, going, and they're not listening. They're done.
Right,
They're on to the next
right,
thing.
right.
And then it's also trying to tailor your story so that it fits an issue that they can relate to. So a lot of times you're not meeting with the legislator, you're meeting with a staff member who usually, it's usually a health person, a policy person.
hmm
And so they might ask you, some of them are very, very good about asking you very detailed, a very specific question that you can answer, but try to figure out how you can kind of tailor it, if the ask is funding, how you can tailor it to that funding and how it's going to benefit all survivors, not just you personally, but how it'll benefit the whole community. Um,
That's a good point.
that's another
Yeah,
thing. And the bullet points are excellent because, right, we kind of get lost. We can have a tendency to we're so overwhelmed. Everything is so big and loud, and you want to just, you know, keep going. And you just, the more specific and succinct you are, I think the better the meeting will go, because you only get 5 or 10 minutes at most.
Right.
Practice makes sense in this
Definitely.
position. One other thing to throw in, if you're driving into DC, give yourself at least a half a day to get from 50 miles out to inside of DC. Don't come riding in hot like I did once. And I got totally lost, overwhelmed, and said, okay, focus, got to bring it in because this is the day you've been waiting for. But I was so overwhelmed because there was right turns and there was left turns that I should not have taken. But I got there. Just
That's true.
DC,
Yes.
DC is very dense in and of itself. So give yourself a half a day just to get there sometimes in a vehicle, that is.
Yeah. And kind of mapping out your route where you'll park, because parking around the Capitol is tough to find.
It's,
Yep.
it's,
So
it's, it's very desperate. It's all over the place. And it's at least 8 blocks to get you
yeah,
to where you go.
yeah, eight
Yeah.
long blocks. The blocks in
Yeah.
DC are
Yeah.
larger. So I think these are all really helpful kind of tips and strategies that folks can use. We encourage folks to um, come and join us and participate as you can if you are able. Certainly, if you cannot make it to DC, you can still be an advocate. You can still contact your legislator, via email, via phone. However, you can visit with your legislator in their home office. If that's closer to you, you can go there and do an in-person visit if you want to do that. So that's still not like if you can't come to DC, you can't advocate. Um, yes, sir.
One
You
of
have
the
a say.
reasons, one of the reasons why this is so important is because of the vast ignorance that's around brain injury. I have post-concussive syndrome, so I don't have a seam on my head. It's all internal. And showing up and using your voice is so important for these folks to hear you. Once they hear you, then they can do something about it or add it up and make a list of people that came and oh, I've got 30 people that came and talked about post-concussive syndrome. Boy, that's a thing. So the more people that show up, I encourage you, if you can do it, show up if you can, because that in and of itself is 9 out of 10 points. You've almost got it made.
Definitely, definitely. So being able to come to DC and just being present there in and of itself is a statement, right? So no matter what you can do, that's great. If you can't come to DC and you're making your statement at the home office or via email, that is still making a statement. So there's no wrong way to do it, but certainly if it's possible to come and participate, we certainly encourage that. It helps to kind of have a group together, as well as kind of just meeting other advocates, other people that are kind of doing this maybe from different parts of the country can be helpful as well. Well, I thank you guys both for coming and sharing a little bit about your experiences and your tips and your strategies. We really hope folks will um, look to join us in DC in March. Um, if folks have questions about coming, etc., you are always welcome to contact us at the Brain Injury Association of America. You can use our helpline, 1-800-444-6443. Certainly reach out to talk to a brain injury specialist to get more information about just today or some of the legislative stuff, or if you just want a little more information, that is always, always, always welcome. Kelly and Paul, thank you for coming on and sharing a little bit today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. I love what this is about, and I
Yeah.
look forward to meeting the next person, whether that's this year or next year. Make it a priority. We'd love to have you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you guys both.